Welcome to Arsenal, where the weapons and war machines of military history come to life. Today we explore the F-111 Aardvark in Cold War deep strike and the crews and opponents who gave it its reputation. If you enjoy learning how technology, tactics, and human decisions come together in combat, you can find more articles, podcasts, and resources at trackpads.com. This aircraft flew hard missions at night.
Far below a black Mediterranean sky, an F-111 skims over the sea, its cockpit lit only by instrument glow and the faint green of radar screens. The pilot barely moves the controls as the terrain-following system flies the jet at low altitude toward the Libyan coast. Beside him, the weapons systems officer nurses the navigation system and watches the electronic warning displays begin to flicker. Arsenal is the Friday feature of Dispatch, U.S. military history magazine. It is a tense, narrow world of headings, altitudes, and timing.
The coastline appears first as a jagged line on radar, then as a rise in turbulence as warm land air meets cooler sea air. Ahead, search radars turn and lock, and the threat receivers begin to chatter with new signals. Tracer fire climbs into the darkness, and thin missile plumes reach upward, looking for aircraft that stay high. The F-111 crew pushes lower, trusting their speed and the curve of the earth to bend beams over their backs. One mistake here can be fatal. When the bomb bay doors open, it happens quickly. The jet steadies, the aiming cues settle, and a string of bombs drops toward airfields and command centers around Tripoli. The crew has only moments to confirm release and slam the doors shut again before turning back toward the sea. Behind them, explosions walk across runways and buildings that had been considered hard to reach. This is what the aircraft was built for. It was made to hit defended targets at long range. The roots of that design reach back to the early Cold War. High-flying bombers and fighter bombers that once felt safe had become vulnerable to long-range missiles and radar-directed guns. The United States Air Force needed a machine that could punch deep into defended territory at night and in bad weather without losing crews to dense belts of defenses. At the same time, there was pressure to create a common aircraft that might serve both land-based and carrier-based needs. It was an ambitious and risky idea. Engineers and planners responded with a concept that combined several new technologies in one airframe. They proposed variable sweep wings that could move back for high speed and forward for takeoff, landing, and low-speed work. They chose powerful turbofan engines for long range and good fuel efficiency. They wrapped it all around a terrain-following radar and navigation system that could fly the aircraft at low level almost automatically. On paper, it promised speed, range, payload, and low-level penetration in a single package. That promise would prove costly to keep. The Navy's carrier version, with shorter nose and heavier landing gear, ran into real trouble on weight and handling, and was eventually canceled. The Air Force, however, kept pushing the land-based version forward through flight tests and early fixes. Test crews reported structural issues, engine surges, and avionics glitches that needed attention. Each problem meant new engineering work, redesigned parts, and more time on the ground. The learning curve was steep and unforgiving. By the time the F-111 matured, its basic outline had become familiar. It was a two-seat, twin-engine strike aircraft built in the United States for deep attack and interdiction. A pilot and weapons systems officer sat side by side in a compact crew module at the front of a long fuselage. Swept-back wings and powerful engines let it fly at very high speed at altitude, while forward-swept wings gave it lift and control down low. It carried a large internal bomb bay and external pylons for weapons, fuel tanks, and electronic pods. It could fly far and hit hard. Walk around one on the ramp, and the details start to stand out. The long nose houses attack and terrain-following radar, with panels and fairings that give it a purposeful, slightly predatory look. The broad fuselage hides the internal bay and the mechanisms for sweeping the wings from forward to fully back. Along the sides, large intakes feed the turbofans, while the rear ends in twin exhausts that pour heat and noise across the concrete. It looks like a machine built to move quickly. It does not look gentle. Climb into the cockpit, and the side-by-side arrangement changes the usual fighter feel. Instead of sitting in separate front and rear cockpits, the pilot and weapons systems officer share the same space and the same forward view. The pilot focuses on flying and overall control, but at low level, much of the flying can be handed over to the automatic systems. The weapons systems officer manages radar modes, navigation updates, radio calls, and weapon setup. In an emergency, the entire crew capsule can blast free and descend under parachute. It is a dramatic escape plan. On a long mission, the two-person crew lives inside that small module for hours. They work through takeoff, formation rendezvous, multiple aerial refuelings, and the long, low-level ingress to a distant target. There are long stretches of quiet, steady flight, broken by bursts of intense activity as they approach tankers, defenses, or the target area itself. Fatigue can creep in as concentration stays high. Veterans describe the sensation of the aircraft flexing and shuddering at speed down low, and the constant background noise of radios and warning tones. It feels like riding a very fast train through darkness. Behind the cockpit, racks of avionics, cables, and hydraulic lines fill much of the fuselage. Ground crews open access panels to work on radar units, flight control computers, and the complex systems that drive the swing wings and landing gear. Maintenance on this aircraft is demanding. Each mission draws down the life of parts that must be inspected, repaired, or replaced. Keeping the aircraft reliable enough for deep strike duty requires careful planning and skilled hands. It is a team effort on the ground as much as in the air. The first real test of the design came over Vietnam. In 1968, F-111As deployed under the Combat Lancer banner to perform low-level night strikes against difficult targets. They flew fast and low over jungle and hills, guided by their terrain-following radars towards supply routes, storage sites, and other hardened positions. Several were lost early in the deployment, some to system failures that exposed weaknesses in the aircraft's structure and equipment. The losses shook confidence and forced a pause for investigation. It was a painful start. When the type returned later with fixes in place, its missions showed what the concept could do. Crews reported being able to reach heavily defended targets in weather and darkness that limited other aircraft. They could go when others were held on the ground. In the final years of the conflict, the F-111 built a quieter reputation as a dependable all-weather strike asset. Commanders learned to count on that reach. Crews learned to accept the risks. Later conflicts confirmed that image. In 1986, F-111Fs from Europe flew long, refueled missions to hit airfields and command sites in Libya, including the kind of heavily defended complexes that had driven the original design. In 1991, during the air campaign over Iraq, the aircraft delivered precision-guided bombs against armored units, bunkers, and infrastructure, often using advanced targeting pods to guide weapons from low or medium altitude. Across these very different campaigns, one pattern held. When planners needed a heavy strike far from base, at night, under threat, the Aardvark was high on the list. Crews and maintainers often highlight range and payload as the aircraft's greatest strengths. It could carry a large load of bombs a long distance, then still have the fuel to fly low and fast in and out of hostile airspace. The terrain-following radar once refined, made low-level attack in bad weather a practical, everyday tactic rather than a rare stunt. The side-by-side cockpit fostered teamwork since both crew members shared the same displays and charts. It felt like a small two-person ship. That mattered on long nights. The aircraft also had real limitations. Its complexity meant high maintenance demands and sensitivity to system failures. Early engine and structural issues left scars in the community, and even later crews remained very aware that low-level flight left little room for error. At short range, enemy gunners and missile crews could improve their camouflage and timing to make the low-altitude environment more dangerous. Compared with more agile fighters, the F-111 was never meant to dogfight and relied on escorts and planning to avoid that trap. Its strengths needed careful use. Over time, the family grew into several distinct variants. Strategic versions extended the aircraft's reach and payload for medium bomber roles. Electronic warfare models replaced bombs with jamming and deception equipment to shield strike packages from hostile radars. Improved strike versions combined more powerful engines with advanced targeting systems for precision-guided munitions. Each new variant reflected lessons learned in combat and in peacetime training. Each tried to refine the balance between capability and complexity. Outside the United States, the Royal Australian Air Force adopted its own long-range versions. Australian crews used the aircraft to cover vast ocean and regional distances, treating it as a key national strike asset. They kept it in service long after American frontline units had moved on to newer types. Their experience underlined the same basic choice. They accepted a demanding aircraft in exchange for unique range and striking power. It was a deliberate trade. By the time the F-111 retired, air campaigns had shifted more toward medium altitude, precision guided by satellites and newer sensors. Even so, its influence lived on in later strike aircraft and in the doctrines that governed deep attack. Ideas about crew workload, low-level navigation, and sensor integration carried forward. In museums and base displays, retired Aardvarks now sit where visitors can walk under their wings and look into their cockpits. They are big machines. For those who served around them, the aircraft is remembered less as a shape and more as a system of people and metal. Pilots, weapons systems officers, maintainers, and planners all contributed to missions that were often long, tiring, and unforgiving. On the other side of the conflict, soldiers and air defenders knew the shock of sudden strikes from an unseen enemy arriving at night or through weather. The F-111 Aardvark earned its reputation in that hard space between design and reality. Its story belongs as much to its crews as to its hardware.